get a translation of today's discussion either in Turkish for this or in English. You can choose one of those two languages. There will be a translation, direct translation, and you can choose that at the bottom of your screen, in the Zoom screen, and you click on interpretation, and there you have two choices. English, that's for English, and I'm sorry, but the only button existing is German. So if you click on German, you will have the translation in Turkish. So welcome to this press conference again that will announce the creation of the Turkey Tribunal in Geneva. This tribunal, including well-known international judges, will start on September the 20th until September 24. It's a special tribunal with no legal obligation, but it has a moral authority. That's at least what the organizers of this press conference want to implement. And so the organizers are at the basis, at the very start, it's a lawyer from the Van Steenbrugge Advocaten who created this Turkey Tribunal, which is a non-profit organization. Now, just to explain why it has been created, what's the goal of it, and how it works, I give immediately the floor to Johan Vande Lanotte, sorry for this, Mr. Dr. Johan Vande Lanotte. He is professor at the University of Ghent and senior legal counsel at the office of Van Steenbrugge Advocaten. Mr. Lanotte, I give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Indeed, we have made a decision to work with what we call a People's Tribunal, the Turkey Tribunal. Our office has been active in defending individual Turkish people, and we still do. But while doing that, we found that structurally, the violation of human rights in Turkey was much more important, and that we could not reach a structural effect and not put the attention sufficiently enough to that structural problem by only the defense of individual people. And that's the idea that we created the Turkey Tribunal. Also, because we could not otherwise than see that the attention that has been paid to the Turkish situation has been quite low. Perhaps it's due to the fact that Europe has made an agreement with Turkey on migration, or whatever the reason is, but it is astonishing, it's surprising that such massive violation of human rights, which is not new, but is continuing, and from 2013 on in a much higher proportion than before, that it has been and stayed quite uncommented. That was the reason we started. How did we do that? We had to fulfill 3-4 elements. First element was we needed good rapporteurs. We needed people to make a report, and we took the decision to make reports on torture, on abductions, on impunity, on the freedom of the press, and the independence of the judiciary. And at the last report about crimes against humanity. Who were the rapporteurs? We tried to find, and I think we succeeded, to find people who have merit already in the field. Eric Sotas, who was Secretary General, for instance, of the World Organization Against Torture for several years, for a long time. We have been working together with Professor Haak from Ghent and Dr. Emre Turgut around impunity. Mr. Judge Pedilli, Italian judge who made reports before for the European Union, for the European Commission on the independence of the judiciary, also in Turkey. We have Philippe Lerut, who is the president of the Journalist Association, World Association of Journalists before. He's not now anymore president, but he was it. And Johan Heymans, who has been active in several human rights cases before the United Nations and others. So we found people who wanted to work on it, and we produced the reports. These reports are now all available. We first had already quite a lot done in August, but with Corona it was a bit later, March then. Now it is finally September, and beginning of August, the final 6 reports have been published. And these reports have been sent to the Turkish government, who can react, but did not react yet, and perhaps will not react. Second element was we need to find good judges, because a People's Tribunal often has not the real high-level legal persons for judgment. That's one of the concerns, actually. We have 3 former judges of the European Court of Human Rights. The president of our tribunal is Françoise Tulken. She was vice president of the European Court of Human Rights. And Giorgio Malinverni, Professor Malinverni from Switzerland, and now assistant professor Lady Bianco from Albania were both also judges in the European Court of Human Rights. John Pace was secretary of the United Nations Commission on Human Rights for several years. He was professor also. He had activities at the field of human rights. We have Johan van Westenhuizen, former judge in the Constitutional Court of South Africa. And because we also wanted someone who had knowledge of the inter-American system, so the system for South and North and Mid-America on human rights, we have Angelita Bayens, who is active before she was active already in the Commission on the American Commission, but now she's active in the Robert Kennedy Foundation on Human Rights, exactly working around this inter-American system. And with these 6 people, we think we have a very high-level, reputed people about whose independence there is no doubt, and also people who have a large experience, and that was quite important for us. The third element, and perhaps the most difficult one, was the witnesses. And we had 2 concerns. First concern, we are looking at human rights violations, whoever it concerns. We are not linked to one or another group. And so it was very important for us that in the witnesses, several groups were present. We have people who have links or are member of the Gülen movement. We have people who have links or are member of the Kurdish movement. We have people who are simply critical towards everything that happens, but are not linked to one or these groups. So we have a representative group, we can say, of the different people who are suffering human rights violations. That was a first concern. And secondly, it was very important for us to get them to the tribunal. We have succeeded in doing that. We have around 15 witnesses. One witness will witness in camera, so meaning in camera without public, only to the judges. The other ones will do it in public. And the people who do it in public, most of them will be present. We have some people who cannot be there. Some are still in Turkey, some are somewhere else, cannot travel, and they will testify digitally. And to make it a little bit more accessible, the people who cannot come to the tribunal physically have made a statement already now on video, and we will be able to publish it. The whole tribunal will be published, will be streamlined, of course, because we need really to pay attention to the possibility that everyone can reach us. The committee who is organizing, that's the last element, is Belgium, because for the practical organization we wanted to not too far. The president is Professor Mark Bossuit. He was president of the Constitutional Court of Belgium, and he was president of the United Nations Committee on Human Rights. He's an eminent lawyer, he's eminent jurist, he's professor in human rights. And 2 rectors of university, Ghent and Brussels, also are members of the organizing committee. The fourth one is Mr. Jan de Bok, who was the former Secretary General of the Foreign Ministry in Belgium and was ambassador to the United Nations for some time and to the European Commission for some time. And the last one is Mrs. Christine Musse, who is a lawyer in our office and make the liaison between the daily activities and this committee. We will start Monday 10 o'clock with Rector Flückiger from University of Geneva. He will give the opening speech, and then we will let the tribunal work. And it would be very helpful for us if we get as much attention as possible. Our general slogan, because silence is the real enemy, the worst enemy of human rights. So we want to break the silence. And of course, what the media will bring on the Turkey Tribunal will be very important. And because we have a very good partner to make this, to make everything public, I give the word now to the floor to Valerie Peay, who is responsible for the International Observatory of Human Rights, who was our partner all along the way still for this tribunal. Valerie.
Thank you very much, Johan. I just want to pick up on something that you said there in case we missed it. The tribunal is formed under the headline because silence is the greatest enemy of fundamental human rights. And that's really important because if you think about, these are very substantial people, all of them have given their time and their knowledge, and they've written very, very good reports. We've had webinars of over 2,500 people, 6 of them in the last 18 months. And this is just identifying that this issue is not something that can be put aside. If you look at the universal peer review of Turkey that was done in January 2020, 124 civil society organizations like my own put forward recommendations to Turkey, and over 100 countries did the same. 18 months have gone by and nothing has changed. And still we're looking at an organizational list of, if you look at these reports, the titles of them: torture, abduction, press freedom, impunity, crimes against humanity, judicial independence. These are very, very serious issues. And Johan and his team have spent a very long time coming to terms with gathering the witnesses, gathering the people to pay attention, to be able to bring a proper legal focus to this, because Turkey is not paying attention. This is not an attack on the Turkish government or the Turkish people. It is a twofold pivot. It's looking backwards at what has happened, and it's wonderful that we're going to have actual witnesses there who have been through abduction and torture. Not wonderful that they've been through it, but they're actually brave enough to stand up and speak about it. But we've also got the legal knowledge of across the world to actually identify what is going on in Turkey today. And the other side of that pivot is to say what needs to change in future. Because right now the UN has put a call on Turkey to say 18 months later, and things are not changing. Things are not moving. There are still, I think the figures, if I'm right, over 138,000 people under investigation for terrorism charges. Journalists, hundreds upon hundreds of journalists are still locked up in prison, still called terrorists, or are in exile and unable to work. And I think as a group of journalists, I mean, my team included, it is really important that we highlight what's still going on. We have the opportunity in Geneva to talk to people who have been through this and who have suffered this fate. And we have the opportunity, because it's the human rights session that is going on, is to really raise this in the press and highlight right now that these crimes against humanity are still going ahead. Now, in London today, we are seeing the Uyghur Tribunal. And again, it's come to private legal individuals to actually make a stance. And I think the response that we're seeing globally to what's happening with the Uyghurs is something that I look forward to happening with Turkey. And I think what I would do is call on everybody within the press, and to thank you for joining us today, to really come listen to the witnesses, listen to the tribunal, and understand what is going on, because this is not something that has just happened a while ago. It's going on today. And we've already seen people being renditioned this year. We've seen people being abducted. We've seen lawyers and judges being cast out of their professions and their work and being put into prison. And this is not something that we should stay silent about. This is something that's very serious. And from, we're a small independent group based in the UK. And for us, we've been very, very conscious of the plight of the Turkish people under this issue. The club Paris de la Suisse were very gracious. They hosted us a few years ago to bring speakers to talk about this. And I think what we've seen is no change. So we've seen Turkey still calling people journalists, calling them terrorists, and closing down social media sites, closing down independent media. We have a huge issue in terms of as I said before, rendition. So the tribunal will give you the opportunity to come and to listen and to meet these people, to be able to interview them, to be able to really think about what this means in our society, and particularly across Europe with such a large Turkish diaspora, then it's important. This is not something that's happening as a Uyghur tribunal in Xinjiang or thousands of miles away. This is happening in a country that wishes to join Europe, that we holiday in, that we visit, that we have business dealings with, that is part of the fabric of Europe. And if you think about that, the fact that lawyers and judges are not safe to do their job, that journalists are being hounded and put in prison, that crimes against humanity are happening today. And this, for me, is the importance of this tribunal. And I would certainly urge you to get in touch, to come to meet the people and to hear what's going on. However, let me pass across to Johan Heymans, who wrote a fantastic report on abductions. And over to you, Johan, and perhaps you can explain a little bit more about the detail of the report and what happens next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Valerie Peay. Just one thing before giving the floor to Mr. Heymans. If you have any questions, you can already raise your hands on clicking at the bottom of your screen on the smiley reactions, or on asking the question through the chat, the discussion chat that you can activate too. So please, if you have questions, just go on, and we'll give you the floor at the end of Mr. Johan Heymans, the Turkey Tribunal rapporteur on abductions in Turkey today, who will speak now. Mr. Heymans, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to still talk a little bit about what will be next after the Turkey Tribunal, because that's also very important. The Turkey Tribunal is important because of the fact that it gives voice to the victims, that it helps with truth finding. But its biggest challenge is that it has no legally binding powers. And that is what we will do next, because the Turkey Tribunal will serve as a stepping stone to go to the International Criminal Court and to file a complaint there with the prosecutor. And the International Criminal Court has that legal binding authority to really sentence people, to hold people accountable and with consequences accountable, in contrast with the Turkey Tribunal. And so how will we do that? Well, the reports and the fact-finding that we have been doing in the context of the Turkey Tribunal gave us so much testimonies, statements, evidence, proofs that crimes against humanity are being committed in Turkey, that we want to go to the International Criminal Court to present all that information. Important in that regard is to stress that Turkey has not ratified the Rome Statutes, but because of the fact that they abduct people internationally, and so they work in different countries. There's around 100 people all over the world who are abducted in the last few years by Turkish secret services and so on, that this international component allows the International Criminal Court to be competent. It is something that recently in the jurisprudence of the International Criminal Court was recognized and was accepted. And well, the same thing is true for Turkey. They have committed, for instance, enforced disappearances abroad, kidnapped people abroad and then brought them illegally back to Turkey. And exactly these things will trigger the competence of the International Criminal Court. So we are now very busy with the Turkey Tribunal, but in the meantime, we're also very busy with structuring and rendering comprehensible all the testimonies and evidence that we have gathered. That will be part of a very big case file that we will then submit to the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, and then we will ask them to investigate the Turkish situation, which they can do, and then go a bit further even and hold the perpetrators responsible. That will be something about which we will communicate more after the Turkey Tribunal, because of course our first preoccupation is making sure that victims are heard, that the truth can be discussed and presented by the judges of the Turkey Tribunal, and then we will provide more information about the complaint before the International Criminal Court. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johan Heymans. You are the Turkey Tribunal rapporteur on abductions in Turkey today. And beside of you, Mr. Johan Vande Lanotte, who is the professor at the University of Ghent and senior legal counsel at the Vande Steenbrugge Advocaten, who initiated this process. Mr. Vande Lanotte, do you have anything to add to this, or no?
No, I think we explained everything very well, thanks to Johan and Valerie. But if there are questions, we are here to answer, of course. If everything is clear, it's also good.
Let me see. There is one question over the chat. Thank you very much for organizing this press conference and putting so much effort in Turkey Tribunal. You are speaking about crimes against humanity, and I totally agree, but what will be the outcome of the Turkey Tribunal? Will it be able to hinder this ongoing crime against humanity? What are the next steps? Who would like to answer, Mr. Van Lanotte?
Yes, well, I think the next step, first, the fact you have reports, you have 6 judges who are really putting a verdict at a certain moment, whatever the content will be, what they say, certainly will be usable before the United Nations, for instance, but also for the European Court of Human Rights. The report will be used, I suppose, and the judgment will be used by the third parties, by NGOs who intervene, by lawyers, for sure. So it could have an impact, we think, on the Council of Europe and the European Court of Human Rights. Secondly, as Johan Heymans explained, it is the first step. We will try in the second step, we will do it. We will go to the International Criminal Court. And of course, the International Criminal Court is quite more important in this sense, that this is a binding court where people can be held responsible. It's a long trip, it's a long shot even a bit, because it's not easy, but it is the first time that responsible persons of these crimes will be held really responsible before independent judges who can proclaim they innocent or guilty. And so I think that is the next step, and we hope, we are quite sure that if we can really go through that second step, that's one step more and an important step also internationally. Once the prosecutor would decide to start an examination and to examine the situation, that's how it is called. In Turkey, internationally, the pressure will grow, that is for sure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vande Lanotte. Perhaps if there are other questions, just raise your electronic hand on tapping reactions at the bottom of your screen, or coming through the discussions, you can type in your question. In the meantime, Mr. Van Lanotte, or perhaps Mr. Heymans or Mrs. Valerie Peay, I would like to know perhaps who are really the main testimonies in this process that will last 4 days. Can you tell us a few names and people that will have a strong impact in all this process?
Yes, it's the names of the witnesses are on our website, www.turkeytribunal.com. For torture, it is a teacher actually, and with this specific, how to say, he's a bit of specific situation because he is as well linked, they say, to the PKK and even partly to the Gulen movement, which is a bit strange. But he's someone who has been the victim of torture. Mehmet Alp he is, and he will testify himself. That's quite important. He kept all his secret notes, his diaries. He's now in Germany, and where he lives as refugee. The second one, also for torture, is also a teacher, Mr. Dogan, and he was also put in jail. He has had the same experience with torture. The third is Mrs. Ellen Keşkin. She's a lawyer, human rights activist. She's the co-chair of the Turkish Human Rights Association. She actually is the victim of nearly 100 complaints, fake complaints by prosecutors, and she's testified most of all to explain the situation of women in all these, because the women are in the Turkish situation more vulnerable even than other people. Because, for instance, there is a, let's say, tradition, it's a wrong word, but it is a practice that they put women in jail just before they have to give birth to their children. So they have to give birth in prison as a kind of punishment. And Mrs. Ellen Keşkin will testify. As far as the impunity, the abductions, we have Mustafa Osman. He was an academic and was abducted. We have Gökhan Güneş, but he's represented by his lawyer himself. It's not possible. His trauma is too important, and so he was abducted and tortured for days. He's now free in his house, but is still traumatized, and his lawyer will explain that. And we have Mrs. and Meral Kashmash, who live in Canada, and who had also an experience of abductions, but were, to be honest, lucky that they could escape. For the press freedom, we have one person in camera, Nathan Okta. He's a journalist who was jailed because of her news pieces. She lives in exile. She will be personally present. And Jerry Guven, who was quite an important journalist and still is actually, and who also will testify, but perhaps is not able to travel because he is still under the requirements of his demand for political asylum.
Okay. Yeah, this gives us a good overview, I guess, of the different testimonies that will be presented between 20 and 24th of September, I repeated. If I may perhaps just ask a question also to the two other speakers, first to Mr. Heymans, as you went pretty deeply in this question as a rapporteur, I would like to know how did the situation evoluted in the last years in Turkey? Is it getting more difficult? Is it getting lighter? What's the situation today, and how has it become in the last years?
Well, the situation has worsened drastically the last few years, in the sense that in Turkey there have been quite a few abductions in the past, in the 80s, 90s, but then the beginning of this century it really diminished. But since 2016 we see that there's an increase again, that more and more people get abducted. Particularly after the July 2016 events, many people disappeared, and where they are remains unknown till today. And we also see a new phenomenon that did not exist so much before, and that is that also Turkey goes international with its abductions. They go to other countries, often in collaboration with the local secret services, in order to illegally bring back people to Turkey, where often then they disappear or tortured and so on.
Thank you very much. This is Valerie Peay. Can you tell us, listening to the situation as it's described by Mr. Heymans, what's the positions and what has been done by the international organizations and principally by the Human Rights Council? How is this question treated in this assembly?
So I think, first of all, from a civil society perspective, there have been so many letters, so many open letters, so many thousands of people and organizations that have signed asking Turkey to change. From the Human Rights Council perspective, Turkey was left in no doubt that they needed to change, for example, their penal code. So the classification of what a terrorist is has been brought up and again, because at the moment it's so broad that just having this conversation today, talking about what we're discussing, we would and potentially could all be branded as terrorists, which is ridiculous. You know, in London, we have very many journalists, Turkish journalists, that were forced to flee because they were just speaking out. So I think from a human rights perspective, and particularly from the Human Rights Council perspective, that's why they've issued this new request, because 18 months have gone by, and all we've seen, as Johan has just said, is a deterioration rather than an amelioration of what's going on. So we've seen Turkey removing itself from a women's rights perspective from the Istanbul Convention, for example. We've seen no adjustment to try and look at what's going on in terms of femicide. We've seen under COVID, thousands of prisoners being locked up in terrible situations, or what is worse, is being kept in remand. So they're being held, but they're not being charged. So they basically just disappear off the system. And I think we've already seen some very damning reports coming out of the Council of Europe, coming out of the different commissioners, different governments, parliaments, and yet nothing has changed. And that's why I think this tribunal is so important. And I think it's not until you read some of the details in the reports. I mean, these are not fanciful. These are normal teachers and doctors and lawyers and journalists that are literally being taken off the streets, renditioned, tortured, just simply because they're saying things need to change for our country. And that's why I think it's so important for the international press to really begin to pay attention again. It's very easy for us to forget with Turkey. We look at them as a strategic partner. We look at them as you know, a way of keeping back a flow of refugees. And yet, again, as we've said with this title, we can't keep silent anymore. And it's time with going to the ICC, going back to the Human Rights Council, it's time that change is beginning to happen.
Thank you very much, Valerie Peay. I remind that you are the Director of International Observatory of Human Rights and that your organization is partner of the Turkey Tribunal. So if there are no other questions or no other comments from the speakers, it's still open. If Mr. Van Lanotte or Mr. Heymans, Mrs. Peay want to add something, to precise something. Okay. If not, I think we will leave it there. And just recall that this Turkey Tribunal will be held at the Intercontinental Hotel in Geneva from 20th September to 24th September, that all interested media journalists can get more information going to our website of the Swiss Geneva Press Club, www.pressclub.ch, or they can also directly get all the information they need if they go to the website of the Turkey Tribunal, which address is the www.turkeytribunal.com. So I hope you have all needed informations to follow up this, this tribunal that will start on the 20th of September. And we will have a press conference about the verdict, the decisions that will be taken in this tribunal on Friday, 24th of September. So welcome to you all. I know you're a lot watching us on streaming, on Facebook, on YouTube, and on our website. And thank you to all of those who were on Zoom today in this somewhat special day in human rights, because Afghanistan question was the big event, human rights event in Geneva today, how to support the people there. But that means we don't have to forget, for sure, other very important and lasting question like situation in Turkey. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you, Tobias.